Hi everyone, I'm Pranoti, host of Under the Microscope. This series is brought to you by the Real Scientists Nano team. Our goal is to provide a platform where scientists can communicate their work and interact with the public. With that in mind, every week we introduce you to a scientist working in the field of materials or nanoscience who tweets from the Real Scientists Nano Twitter account, which is realsci_nano.
Hi everyone. Today we have with us Chris Nicholson, who is a group leader at the Fritz Haber Institute of the Max Planck Society in Berlin, Germany. Hi Chris, how are you?
Hi, Pranoti. Very good, thank you. How about yourself?
I am good and excited to know about your science. So
Ah,
let's start with understanding your research. So could you explain your research to us in super simple words, please?
super simple words. So basically, I'm interested in electrons, and probably a lot of the people that you have on your podcasts are also interested in electrons. But for me, the particular interest is really the electronic structure in materials. So we think about atoms, atomic structure, crystal structure in a solid, but the electrons also have their own structure. And of course, this isn't necessarily a real space structure where you have, electron at one position, second position, and so on like this, because the electrons are running around within a solid all the time. But they have a particular structure in energy and momentum. And this is what I look at in detail. Basically, the idea is to understand uh, particular behaviors that happen, that occur in materials when there are lots of these electrons running around together and bumping into each other all the time. Because this is quite different to what happens when you just have a single electron or two electrons that don't really talk to each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, the idea of the research is to understand behavior that happens when all these electrons produce new behaviors.
Uh-huh. Okay, so it's like a dance of electrons, and you're trying to understand how they're bumping into each other and talking to each other.
Exactly, yeah.
So do you do this at like room temperature or low temperatures or high temperatures? Because I guess with temperatures, the mobility of the electrons will be different, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. So we tend to look at different temperatures.
Hmm.
So the kind of behaviors that I'm interested in, I would call them emergent phases. So things that you wouldn't expect just from putting a few electrons together. Suddenly you
Okay.
have a new behavior that happens only when you have all of them together at once.
Right.
And quite often that sets in at a particular temperature. So let's say you would measure at room temperature, you would have a particular kind of electronic behavior there. But then
Mhm.
maybe at 100 Kelvin or 50 Kelvin, wherever, the electrons rearrange themselves because of some energetic process, and they form this new structure, a new behavior.
Mhm.
And that could be, for example, a transition to a superconducting phase, or it could be a transition to an insulating phase or a magnetic phase. So these are the kind of things that I have in mind, and therefore looking at different temperatures, of course, gives you different view behavior of a crystal.
Mhm. Okay, interesting. Oh, that sounds so interesting. Awesome. I hope you will talk a lot about it when you're taking over the account, and there would be hopefully lots of lab pictures and experiment pictures, and yeah, more talk about the materials as well. Already excited and looking forward to that. Speaking of which, what can the followers expect in the week that you will take over the Real Scientist Nano Twitter account?
So obviously, I thought I'd talk a bit about the research that I do and that I've just mentioned, and kind of go into some of the details in a particular direction that I'm interested in, which is ultra-fast dynamics of electronic structure.
Mhm.
And so I'll probably start with that on the first day, on Monday. And then I thought I'd try and give it a couple of different ways of, I thought I'd give a couple of different views into the different sides of my job. So one day I'll try and look a bit more how life is in the lab and what that means for us in our home lab here, but also a little bit um, labs around the world that we visit for our measurements. Um, the second specific aspect that I wanted to look at was writing, because I do a lot of that at the moment with proposals and papers and various other things.
Mhm.
And actually, why for me that's something that I enjoy and how I Yeah, exactly.
We
How,
need to
how
talk
I
about
enjoy
that.
it, how I get myself into a good writing kind of process, and what it is for me that I like about it. Because I think that's also something that's important for a scientist. Of course, writing, you have to do a lot of it, so therefore you should try and find ways to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Then maybe something a little bit kind of away from the lab, but still related to science. So conferences, schools, outreach, this kind of stuff. What it is that I do, because I'm organizing a conference now, for example. So what does that mean for me? What kind of tasks do we have to do? What kind of things do we think about? And finally, on Friday, I thought I'd look at the kind of international aspect of science from a personal point of view. So what is it? I mean, of course, we can go through my CV and say I went to this place and that place, but what did it actually mean in terms of decisions that I made for my life when I decided that I was going to work abroad? And how did that work out? And what kind of challenges were there? And what kind of opportunities came up? And this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And of course, along the way, I'll try and throw in little bits of science related to what I'm doing into all those things. But that's the kind of general plan.
Oh, that sounds great. That sounds really cool. I mean, other than the science, I personally am interested in the writing tips because I could have used those when I was writing my master and PhD thesis.
I'm not promising
Um,
tips necessarily, but we'll see what I can do.
Okay, fair enough. And also the living and traveling abroad as a scientist, because most of the scientists do travel or do have to travel, be it for PhDs or master studies or postdocs or their further careers. So it would be really great to hear from you. What was your point of view? How did it affect your decisions and the different opportunities and challenges that you face? I think that would be really, really interesting. So thank
Okay,
you
yeah.
very much. Thank you very much, Chris. Looking forward to having you on Real Scientist Nano. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thanks. Looking forward to it.
Thank you for listening. This is Pranoti, host of Under the Microscope. To know more about us, visit our website, thesciencetalk.com, and follow us on Twitter at realsci_nano.